Thank you. Well, look, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and experiences with us, and I'm sure you all found that extremely thoughtful, thought-provoking, and also very inspirational. I'm now going to open up the room for some questions, and I'm sure a number of you will have some questions that you'd like to put to Dr. Spence, but I might start the ball rolling by asking you talked, Dr. Spence, about the multi-faceted approach that you're taking to changing the university to focus on developing leaders for the Australia, and you posed questions about what that might look like. From your perspective, what's the biggest challenge? That's not to say that all the others aren't challenging, but is there one particular challenge that stands out the most for you in terms of this journey?
Yes, so I think the biggest challenge is precisely the multifaceted nature of the project. This is not an area of activity in which there is a silver bullet. This is an area of activity in which you really do have to think as an institution about your values, your policies and procedures, your educational offerings, your staff training, right across the board. And therefore, the institution has to be really up for it. Before we wrote our institution Indigenous strategy, and indeed before we got our Deputy Vice-Chancellor Indigenous Strategy and Services, that's the highest ranking position in Indigenous education in Australian higher education, I was very keen that we should make sure that this is something the university was doing not merely because it was sort of PC or because of a certain sort of ex-colonial guilt or whatever it might be, but actually something that the institution genuinely wanted to do. And we spent a lot of time working with and talking with leaders at every level of the organisation. And we're very pleased to find that there was genuine enthusiasm about the project. Similarly, I think if you're going to take on this issue of preparing leaders for a diverse Australia, it has to be something that, and of course there will be critics right across the university. That's what universities do. Academics are trained to dissect things in 5,000 ways. But there has to be enough confidence across the institution that the university is sincere in its attempt to do this, and enough commitment to the project from key culture bearers at every level of the organisation. And so a lot of the work we did in the values project around the strategy was ensuring that in fact there was that kind of buy-in across the university.
My name is Zia Ahmed. I retired after 40 years of service at Sydney University. If you remember, I've met you a few times. Founder of the Sydney University Muslim Student Association in 1972. Just on your comment regarding awareness, I just want to give my experience that really there has been a big change, what I saw over 40 years in my interaction in the community as well as Sydney Uni. Just to remind you that, or relate to you that when I started there and Ramadan time came, I was too shy to tell people that I was fasting because they won't have a clue about it. So I had to make, every year I had to make different excuses that, I can't go for the tea times, I don't feel like doing it and all that. But over the years, things changed. Now, it really sort of shocked me that during the last, say, 10 years or something, there was fasting month. I was fasting, but one of my Muslim colleagues, he wasn't fasting. And he was sitting in the tea room. And a couple of people who were not Muslims, they went there and said, "What the hell are you doing here?" They're trying to kick him out, that, fasting time, how come you're drinking tea? So you can see that, and now, Ramadan and Iftar and all that have become pretty well known, not just in the uni, but even in the community. I think there's been a big change in awareness of our diversity, our practices, which people of different faiths do. So I think there's some good change which is happening there.
I think that is exactly true. That's got to be exactly right. There is really positive movement and positive movement in the community as a whole. Nevertheless, and I'm pleased to say that most of it is not university students. We regularly scrub both Islamophobic and anti-Semitic graffiti off toilet walls. And for SUMSA, a big challenge at the moment is sectarian division in SUMSA. So it's not merely about equipping. It's about equipping all students to help navigate this issue of disagreement and difference, and to help them to navigate it in a way that is genuinely constructive and committed to finding a way forward together. And I think that remains a challenge for Australia, and in some ways things are getting better, but in some ways actually at the moment the challenge is really quite acute.
My name is Luke Johns. I'm from Soccer Cafe International Australia. My question is about the ideals that you were talking about. I think are very respectworthy, very important. I wonder how even the universities in the Sydney Basin actually work together to achieve these things. What kind of cross collaboration, what kind of ideas do you share and work together to create a sort of a more harmonious sort of relationship between the actual university students?
So it's an interesting question, and I think at the moment there isn't a huge amount of collaboration in this particular space between universities. Universities are only just beginning to learn what the universities in Sydney Basin are only beginning to learn what collaboration between the universities might look like more generally. And certainly we're putting a lot of effort into, in particular, improving relations with UNSW in various areas and having more joint research projects and programs and all the rest of it. But in the area of student life and of curriculum development, universities are still pretty much of an island. And I think what you offer is a challenge to me to think about more generally how we can work together. We tend to nick one another's good ideas in this space, which is a good thing, but there's less deliberate cooperation.
It would be nice to see a more humanitarian competition, perhaps, between the universities.
Yes.
I didn't study at Sydney, but I studied law, and there was a distinct lack of diversity amongst the academics who told me. I'm wondering if you have any policies in place or targets as part of this new program to encourage diversity amongst staff.
So we have targets in the area of Indigenous employment. We have targets in the area of employment for women. We do not yet have targets in relation to staff of culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. That's a conversation that we are starting at the moment, particularly in relation to leadership positions. What we do have is a number of programs for leadership mentoring and sponsorship for staff of culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. Because we admit that a problem for us as an institution is that at a leadership level, we look pretty monochrome. And that's not surprising because Australia looks pretty monochrome, but it is surprising when you look at the diversity of our student body and our staff at the lower, in the lower ranks. So that is something that the university has taken on as a challenge. One of the questions that often comes in that area, of course, is diversity compatible with a commitment to excellence? To which our answer is absolutely yes. All the academic work demonstrates that more diverse leadership teams produce better outcomes on all the criteria. And in particular, if we genuinely do think a big part of our role is to produce leaders for a diverse Australia, then we better start modelling that at home.
My name is Steve Brown. I'm from Australia Legal School. My question would be like, if there's any specific programs or policies as a university, your university or as universities, to help the organization like Unity or aid organization who's dealing particularly with the refugees, newcomers, to integrate into the society?
So we have, the university has a refugee scholarship program, along with, that's something that we did in collaboration with other universities, a refugee scholarship program, and those students are, we have various programs for supporting those students. We don't have a broader program for the support of refugee students generally. We'd be certainly open to talking to community organisations about what more we might do in that space. It's something about which we are our conscience is constantly pricked at the highest level of the university, because on the university senate is the principal of Holroyd High, which is a high school that has an unusual track record of success in graduating, matriculating refugee students into universities.
Good, because they sort of surprisingly noticed that there are quite a few number of academics or professionals among the newcomers. So, I mean, even apart from the students, if they can develop that sort of integration program, the locals and all.
It's not surprising really, in the sense that, I've taught refugee students, and they come from families that, to have gotten to the new place, are usually quite remarkable, and have large amounts of social capital at home and all this. So it's not that surprising.
Some people.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, I think you were next, and then I'll take you after that. Thank you.
Dr. Spencer, I was wondering if you could speak about what's happening internationally, and possibly where there might be a particular example of excellence in this space, or alternatively how Australia compares internationally with other universities.
There aren't many examples internationally of great success in this space. A lot of programs in the US, but they tend to be focused almost exclusively on racial diversity, on African American, non-African American, and Hispanic and non-Hispanic lines, and of course they've been highly contested. What not many institutions have done have thought about what diversity might mean as an issue for the curriculum, and that's where actually we think we're doing something quite distinctive, and something that we think is very important. One program that we tried last year that sort of flopped and didn't flop at the University of Sydney, but that I have a great deal of respect for, is the program at Yale run by run by Miroslav Volf, called A Life Worth Living, which is a program that has speakers in from different faith traditions, and students put a set of the same questions about sort of the nature and purpose of life to speakers from both different faith traditions and actually non-faith traditions, and then are encouraged to reflect on and compare their reaction to those different traditions. We ran a version of that last year, in which, for example, the Islamic chaplain, who I know is well known to Affinity, was involved. It was very popular with staff, so we had about 250 or so staff to each of the sessions. Not popular with students, and so we've got to think of a way of attracting students into those kinds of programs. I think it was not popular with students because it wasn't for credit.
I've got a question here, then I've got one over there, and then one there. Thank you.
My question is also a little bit related to what you were just talking about. In the
So it's a great question, and I think the answer is that I honestly believe that those two things are not in tension. Let me give you a specific example why. So one of the things, I mentioned before that the University of Sydney was founded for excellence in community service. One of the things we've been doing in the first 5 years of our strategic plan, and we're committed to continuing, is to say, what would it mean if you began by asking the questions our community is asking and built your research around that rather than the questions that academics are asking. And the first thing that everybody says is it would mean ranking suicide, because rankings are built on things like citation metrics and on publications in specific journals that have a strong bias towards narrowly disciplinary activity. But we know the questions the community are asking don't fit neatly into any individual discipline and therefore are inherently multidisciplinary. But nevertheless, in the first strategic plan, we committed to much large and small scale multidisciplinary activity. So a good example that we were talking about, I'll give you two examples. One is the Charles Perkins Centre for Obesity, Diabetes and Cardiovascular Disease, where we really do have everybody from philosophers to physiologists working together, and they work in networks organised around complexity theory that mean that you're always working with someone just a bit to the left or to the right of your discipline, but ideas get passed along the chain. And the KPI for the Charles Perkins Centre, the only metric we have set is, can they demonstrate that they have improved either the incidence or treatment of these diseases in New South Wales and beyond. And that itself is a kind of intellectual challenge to work out exactly how you measure that. A similar project in Western Sydney, we're committed to working with the Western Sydney Local Health District. Traditionally, research in hospitals has gone that people do their day job treating people, and then they do their night job writing obscure articles for journals. Well, we've said, well, what would it mean if you had academics actually addressing their research to questions that the health system was asking? And again, that's been challenging both for the health district and the university, but it's an interesting journey that we are beginning. What we are seeing is that actually, and the Charles Perkins Centre is a good example, we are recruiting much more highly ranked researchers than we would have been able to recruit otherwise from around the world, really quite extraordinary people. And we are also getting the very strong citation rates in top-ranked disciplinary journals. So we've just jumped 32 places on the so-called Shanghai Jiao Tong Index, partly as a result of this commitment to the multidisciplinary. So sort of by turning your face away from the metrics stricto sensu to the issues the community is facing, what we've discovered is that you can have that and get this as well. And similarly, I think in the teaching area, it's not going to be good enough in 10, 15, 20 years' time to be able to churn out people who can decline a Latin verb and not do much else. Those graduates are just not going to cut it. And the skills that employers tell us they want people to have is, yeah, they assume as a given that you're a great aeronautical engineer. They also want to know that you can work in culturally flexible ways in the many different markets to which you might descend. They also want to know that you've thought about the ethics of dealing with this local government about the river you're about to dam. They've also, so there's not an incompatibility between excellence and a focus on what you've called the softer skills. In fact, I think eventually those things will become an attribute of excellence by any measure. So we sort of think that you can have your cake and eat it too, but it's risky. You know, when we set out to do the Charles Perkins Centre, that's a $500 million project. Many people told us it was rankings deaf.
In industries where there is no money or in the care about the importance.
Yep.
How would you think about your universities?
I think that's why you have universities. I mean, I think that universities are not businesses. We don't have shareholders. We have communities to whom we are accountable. We have to be able to pay our staff bill, and we have to be able to put our staff in reasonable facilities. Beyond that, we don't need money. Societies create universities precisely to think through the issues that are not otherwise going to be thought through. And so we think that those kinds of things are a part of our core mission.
Thank you. We've only got time for the two questions that have their
Sorry.
hands up before. I'm just trying to keep us all to time. There was one from you, and then I think there was the final question down there. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Clive Pearson. I teach theology, and I belong to a church which more than 30 years ago did something multicultural. It's now changed and calls itself culturally and linguistically diverse. And there are always a group of people who are very keen on trying to work out the implications of that. But they're often a minority. And the language of being competent across cultures can be highly aspirational rather than real. What kind of criteria, have you identified particular types of criteria for competency, cultural competency, and how does one then monitor or keep some sort of oversight of that?
We have the National Centre for Cultural Competence, and as you'll know, these things are a source of endless academic debate, and it's debate into which we engage, and that I think is important in all sorts of ways. I suppose the kind of cultural competence that we are focusing on is I think not a million miles away from what I hope universities have always done. That is, it is a certain kind of intellectual humility, and a certain sort of capacity to engage in critical thinking, and a certain capacity to listen. We do think that there are ways that you can measure those things as graduate outcomes. It is a kind of area of endlessly technical argument. But we're not looking for our students to be able to, say, for example, describe the endless varieties of Islam or Christianity and give you and write you a thesis on the thing. We're simply requiring them to have had some genuine experience of engagement with the other, whatever the other might be for them, and to have developed the intellectual skills to listen and both to agree and disagree respectfully. And I don't think that's asking too much of a university graduate. Like, if we can't achieve that, we should pack up and go home. But the evidence in our community is that university graduates have not been achieving it. The universities have not been achieving that, or we'd have better politicians.
Now, our last question, and if we could, there was one up the back, is that right? No? All right, well, let's help us. Sorry.
I just wanted to ask, you mentioned at the beginning of your speech all of these peak bodies that don't have anyone from a diverse background in them. What do you think, if there is at all, what do you think the role of universities would be in not only educating people from diverse backgrounds, but then assisting them in getting into those positions in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question, and a part of what we're doing in our real world problem solving. So, our new undergraduate degrees will have three characteristics. First of all, you will have one or two structured disciplines, probably more structured than they are at the moment, and that's because you have to know something about it, something to know anything about anything. All the literature shows that. Second, you will be required to take some subjects from what we're calling an open learning environment, digital and data literacy, ethics, cultural competence, great worldviews, a whole suite of subjects. Third, you will be required to have this extended real-world problem-solving experience. either on campus or off campus. Right? And the on campus thing is important because it allows you to deal with large numbers of students more easily in this way. What we're doing with that is effectively democratizing what our students with large amounts of social capital do already. So, you know, I was talking to a student a while ago who, by the time he was applying for jobs, had worked 3 days a week as a real analyst in an investment bank, done all the usual jobs of serving coffee and all the rest of it, founded a charity that had raised $1 million in memory of a deceased parent, ran an online business with a mate that manufactured things in China, brought into a university sports club from 50 to 500 members, all the rest of it, and he wasn't getting interviews. Right? Now, we got some interviews, but he wasn't getting them at all. Because these days, by the time the kids with large amounts of social capital from our institution graduate, they not only can pass your Latin verb, but they have lots of real-world problem-solving experience. The people who are having to flip hash at McDonald's, they tend to have less of those opportunities because they're busy keeping body and soul together. What we want is every student to be able to say, I was a part of a group that helped Muddy Parky think about access to regional housing in Western New South Wales. I was a part of a group that helped Cisco solve this particular problem. And we think that will help a broader diversity of our students find a placement. Now, of course, some of those students will be some of the students with large amounts of social capital are from cold backgrounds and some are not, but we think it will help a greater diversity of our students find a thing. Second, we're investing in our career service specifically to help place, which is at the moment pretty undercooked, specifically to make more effort to place and track the careers of graduates so we can think through the kinds of issues that you're talking about. We're one little institution, we can't change Australia overnight, but we've produced an awful lot of Prime Ministers. And we do think that that is an institution responsible for producing business and government leaders. We need to take those kinds of areas after the university more seriously than we have.
Thank you very much. Well, look,
Thank you all for those questions, which I think helped even get more out of Dr. Spence than we'd even hoped for. So on behalf of the group, I'd really like to thank you very much for not only your presentation, but for being so frank and open and practical with your responses to the questions, which were most enlightening. And I'm sure if you feel like me that you will go away inspired to do better in your own professional and personal lives in fostering harmony, but also being better in contributing to our community at large. So thank you very much for the inspiration you've provided.